Come out to VWatts Furniture for a day at the Country Fair with Mom. Aim, throw, and save up to 30% off. Celebrate with Mom at the Country Fair this Saturday at VWatts Furniture.
Drive a little, save a lot. VWatts Furniture.
And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Joined today by a parish councilman. We're going to be talking about something that I think affected quite a bit of people here over the last couple of weeks, receiving some letters. Also, sort of a continuation of the flood that we continue to talk about from 2016. So, good morning, sir. Introduce yourself for us, please, so the listeners out there can put a voice to a face to a name.
Garry Frog Talbert, Councilman District 2, representing Watson and the northwest corner of Livingston Parish.
Northwest corner, yes. He and I are directionally challenged. We figured that out. I can find my way anywhere, but if you ask me north, south, east, and west, I'm probably going to mess it up. So today, we're going to be talking about substantial damage. Roughly 1,200 property owners, some may or may not be the actual tenants there, received letters stating that their property, home, was substantially damaged. So we're going to kind of bring folks up to speed on this back and forth between the parish and FEMA, and let people know. So if you're interested in kind of what can you do to not necessarily combat this, but work through the process, we're going to be talking about that after we go through the history. So first and foremost, Mr. Talbert, I was covering the council at that time. I mean, I still cover the council, but it was pre-COVID, way pre-COVID.
Right.
I was more there in person. And starting in 2019 is really when FEMA started to push back on the parish. So the first thing that happened was y'all received a letter from FEMA Region 6 stating that there were going to be some consequences for maybe not necessarily misrepresentation of what happened after the 2016 flood, but didn't exactly follow FEMA code. So let's go ahead and start there with y'all receiving that letter, and we will get into the community rating system in just a second.
Well, we got the letter. We got the letter from FEMA that basically said we had some problems. If I remember correctly, I think the letter identified about 3,800 structures, somewhere like that.
Between 35 and 4,000.
Yeah, I mean, and structures that possibly had been substantially damaged. It should not have been permitted to be rebuilt. And let's clarify, you could permit them to make them inhabitable. You could permit them, put sinks in them, toilets in them. You could make them livable. What you couldn't do was rebuild them to the level that they were prior if, certain things existed. They were in a floodplain, they were below BFE, or it was going to cost more than 50%, of the value of the home, not the value of the whole property, just the value of the structure. The administration and the parish as a whole made a decision in an effort to make it possibly easier on people that they just asked for a permit. We came and checked the moisture in the studs before you closed them up, and then you got to kind of do what you wanted to do with respect to, how you redid your home. I know when my wife and I redid ours, I think we ended up hanging like 3 laminated beams in the house, and we went to an open floor plan. I mean, we just made some improvements, which, I mean, I paid for those out of pocket, but I mean, we made some improvements to our home while we had it, basically gutted 4 foot down. So, that was a choice we made, but we were able to identify those costs versus the other costs so that if we ever were looked into, we could show what it cost to repair the home and what other parts were improvements.
Sure. So, backing up just a second, what he was talking about with the 3,500 to 4,000 homes were those that were in special flood hazard areas, or SFHAs. We're going to try to avoid as many acronyms as possible today because I know those can get confusing. But based on FEMA flood maps, those are homes that are in areas that, for the most part, flood even when it rains hard. So there were roughly 4,000 total structures. It was a number that FEMA kept hammering on y'all. After the flood, the parish inspected only 343 homes. So this was the gap in information that FEMA was attacking. So we're going to talk 1 second about the immediate consequence, which is the community rating system removal. And then we're going to talk about sort of the steps that the parish council took up until this point at the behest of the administration and working with FEMA. So first and foremost, one of the immediate consequences that the parish faced was removal from the community rating system. Will you give us a little bit of background?
Well,
on that?
basically, I mean, we still participate in the program, meaning that we still can have flood insurance in Livingston Parish. However, we don't. There is a system 1 to 9 based on, how strong your laws are with respect to flooding, or drainage with construction. It also has to do with things you can do by community involvement, and so I mean, some stuff is as simple as putting brochures in the libraries,
Right.
and that's kind of how I came to understand this, is that we were working on an ordinance at that time, strengthening, what, the drainage impact and what it would be on surrounding areas when commercial and developments were being built and subdivisions were being built. And I asked somebody, I'm like, well, shoot, we might actually get a lower rating. And he said, hell, y'all going to get kicked out the system. Or, I mean, so it was like, what? And it's, so when that was kind of the first, idea that we had a problem. Anyway, so basically what it amounts to now is that if you live in Livingston Parish, you basically pay a 15% surcharge, as I understand, on your flood insurance. And once we get in compliance and start doing some things, the way they want them to be done, then we'll get back in the system. And then some of those things that we've done, raising BFE, it's now BFE +1, by strengthening, what you've got to study, on outfall in new development and how that impacts their neighbors. All those things will improve. And heck, we hope not to be a 9 when we come back in, but that we'll figure that out when we get there. So moving forward, that's we've kind of made some adjustments. We didn't used to have a certified floodplain manager. I guess I think now we have 2.
Right.
And so we've made some tremendous improvements, since 2016. Now we've made improvements since 2019. And so, I think going forward that we're going to be fine. But we do have this, sword hanging over our head on the 1,200 letters. We talk about that number, what do we talk about? 3,500 to 4,000. I said 3,800, whatever. That number's been beat down to 1,200. I mean, there's still 1,200 people that are going to be negatively impacted by the actions of the parish, but we're going to do everything we can to help them. We're going to try to give them some information. We're going to let them know what they can and can't do, and try to, ease this as much as we possibly can.
So we're going to get to what those folks can do in a second, but want to talk about where those letters came from. One of the things you talked about was BFE +1. That's base flood elevation +1. That was a freeboard ordinance that y'all passed at the parish level. You also passed a flood damage protection ordinance, which is basically the substantial damage ordinance, which is what you were talking about earlier. Structure 50% damaged or more. It also has to do with improvements as well. That's the interesting thing. It goes both ways. So if you're adding on to your home, it's still subject to that 50% increase. You might have to elevate that portion of the home above base flood. So anyway, with that substantial damage ordinance passed, the parish then liaised with FEMA and said, we are going to go inspect these homes. Now that process started pre-COVID and got delayed due to COVID, but eventually, based on your knowledge, how'd that come together?
Well, I mean, FEMA originally was going to send, I don't remember the number, 30-something people down here. They never got to that number. Probably COVID had a lot to do with it. But in the process of working, with FEMA and us inspecting, that number, I'm gonna say 3,800. It was 35 to 4,000. That number got beat down to 1,200. You know what I'm saying? And so we were able to, go out and look. I'm not saying everybody in the 1,200 number of the letters went out is totally accurate. I was talking to somebody in the administration right before we came in to clarify something, and we talked about a guy that lives off 4-H Club Road whose home is elevated.
Right.
The bottom floor is able to be utilized. It got flooded, and the letter was based on that. He can easily just go show my living area, the part that's covered by flood insurance is elevated above, where it needs to be, and he's going to be fine. You know what I'm talking about? It's just there's some things that some stuff just slipped through the cracks, and so there are people in those $1,200 letters that have a chance to appeal and fix some of these things that are technically might not be accurate. But it's gonna require a little work. I mean, it's not gonna just call them up and say, "Hey, y'all are wrong." You're gonna have to document some stuff and move forward. You have to go. You need to know what the value of your home was in 16.
Right.
And so how do you do that? You go to the assessor's website. Sometimes, typically, and I'm not hammering anybody. Typically, homes are always tend to be a little undervalued.
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about? Your house might list as a $25,000 lot and a $200,000 home, and really it's a $50,000 lot and a $300,000 home. You know what I'm talking about? Because property, they look at the last time you bought it, and property values have changed. So you're going to have to do some work to kind of figure out what was. Look at comps in 16 around your area and try to figure out what was the value, what were homes selling for pre-flood in my neighborhood, by the square foot, and then apply it to your home, kind of figure out what your value is. And then you just got to go document what you spent. I spent this. If you got flood insurance, FEMA wrote you a check. It's kind of easy to figure out,
Right.
what your damage was. So those things you'll have to put that together and file an appeal.
So obviously there is the appellate process if you want to go through that process, but there's another process through FEMA and through the federal government called Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. There's a lot of different programs within that, but the one we're talking about is home elevation or acquisition. I would imagine most of these people who've rebuilt their homes wouldn't be interested in the acquisition part, but the elevation part is still available. Now, funding is limited and must be appropriated by Congress, so
Right.
it's a slow moving deal. But one of the recommendations you had was people should go apply for that.
If you got a letter, you probably ought to just go apply. And I'm going to tell you why. Because once you make an attempt to mitigate, that part of the letter that said you weren't available for federal aid under a flood anymore goes away. So it is very important that you go make the attempt to mitigate. So contact, the parish president's office. They'll I don't want to give you the girls' names on the radio. They'll be swamped. They're not gonna be real proud when I tell 1,200 people you need to call them and make application. But I mean, ultimately that is the most important thing to do. Then some of those aspects of the letter go away. And because you're making an attempt. Let's face it, there is not funds available to elevate or buy 1,200 structures within this parish.
No.
So they're going to be evaluated based on, most, let's say, typically, you've been flooded prior, it's a recurring deal, or, who was, where the structure is it tend to flood on often, and then, there are going to be some evaluations on those things to determine, what's funded first when money becomes available. It's a slow moving process, but it is important to make the application. And God forbid we have another flood that, that federal aid you got, if you hadn't made the attempt to mitigate and you receive one of the letters, it clearly outlines won't be available to you. However, if you've made the attempt to mitigate, then that federal aid will still be available. And I think it's important. I mean, there were people who didn't have flood insurance in 2016 that if it wouldn't have been for federal aid, probably wouldn't have survived, financially through some of that stuff. I'm not saying it was easy. I'm just saying that, that initial check, that you got and some of that other stuff, some people got trailers, some people didn't. I mean, that thing made it, survivable. I know that my wife and I, we went and lived with my mom in Baton Rouge initially after the flood, but because my son was still at Live Oak, he lived with a neighbor who didn't flood. And so our family, up until we got the FEMA trailer, was separated. And it was really hard on my wife, and so, we were able to get a 2-bedroom, FEMA trailer at the house, and everybody was able to get back under one roof, and it made it easier to remodel and get ready, get the house back, being there. Not Plus, I mean, I work and live in Livingston Parish, so I hated the commute from Baton Rouge every day. But I was fortunate and got a FEMA trailer. But let me tell you something: those living expenses that we got and some of those things really lessen the blow. And if I wouldn't have had flood insurance, I'd still be paying some note somewhere to for because of what happened in 2016. But I was lucky. You know, I had flood insurance on my home, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Right. So to wrap up this part of it, the two best things that these folks can do, and number one, really before the appellate process, is to contact. It is the Livingston Office of Homeland Security.
Right.
Correct? Go Google Livingston Office of Homeland Security. It should be a 225-686 phone number. There's an email on there as well. I think he's about to look it up for us.
I'm gonna tell you the number at the office that you're supposed to call is 225-686-3066. And if you need to send an email, it would be eoc@lpgov.com.
And you need to contact them about you want to apply for the HMGP program, especially if you are out in the parish or if you are inside the city limits of Denham Springs or Walker, you can contact either one of those cities. But if you are outside those municipal limits, you need to call the Department of Homeland Security in Livingston. That's the first step. Second step, as we discussed, was the appellate process. You want to try to appeal. Remember, you got to have that paperwork. How much did you spend? What was your home valued? Please, if you can't figure that out, you can always contact the clerk of court's office to get those conveyance records. They will have the initial value of your home. You can also contact the assessor's office in Livingston. Both of those offices can help you out with those issues. And, of course, your tax dollars funds their operations, so they will be more than happy to help you. So, Mr. Talbert, anything you'd like to say to sort of wrap this up?
Well, look, there was a lot of blame about people, this person did that person did that. Look, everybody made decisions in a stressful time. You know what I'm talking about? They made decisions for what they thought was the betterment of everybody. I remember friends that lived in the city of Denham Springs, in the city of Walker, that complained about how hard the process was. However, we know why the process was harder there, because there's probably not a single letter going out in Denham Springs or Walker, because they inspected every home.
And it is important to mention that both Denham, Walker, and the parish all received offers of assistance from FEMA. Denham and Walker took it. The parish did not.
And look, why, I don't know, but that's water on the bridge. We're moving forward, trying to fix, the problems that exist now and help our citizens. I really think that when you looked at the number of homes within the parish, it was just kind of overwhelming.
Sure.
And you look at the permit department, the number of people they got, I think it was just overwhelming. And the thought process was, there's no way we can put eyes on all these homes. And if we do, we're just going to drag the process out. Hindsight's 20/20, always is. Probably what we should have done is said, yes, send us some people down, and made the attempt to put eyes on every structure. And if we'd have done that, we wouldn't have some of these problems. So, it's always easy to be armchair quarterback, Sunday
Sure.
evening or Monday morning. So it's a different deal. But we as a parish are going to do everything we can to try to help people. I've gotten some phone calls. I got some phone calls yesterday. A friend of mine called me. I was trying to get some information for him. He was asking about, buying a permit to add on. That's going to be tough, for a while. It's my understanding though, and is that occupancy permits won't be an issue. He was worried, like, if a limb falls on my house and tears the power off and I got to rebuild the service, how do I do that? I don't think those are going to be issues. I think what we're looking at though is if you want to add on to your home, we got a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to, there's some guidance that came down from that, that we've got to follow now. Because if we don't, we're going to stay in the same boat we've been in. You know what I'm talking about? So there's some things that the parish are going to have to do that are not necessarily palatable to everybody, but we're going to have to do it because that's what FEMA wants, and that's what we put in that handbook on how we would deal with this stuff. So we're just going to have to follow the rules. Look, I mean, it's referred to as a free state. There have been times that, I've always said it's easier to ask forgiveness and permission sometimes, and there have been a lot of people that have operated within the parish like that for a long time. But there's some things that are changing, and there's just some things that are going to have to be done by the rules, and we don't have any opportunity, to bypass that, or we're going to continue to stay in a bind. I mean, I don't know. There's nobody knows for sure, but there's a chance that if you got a letter and you have to have flood insurance, you might not get underwritten flood insurance. You might be paying actuarial costs on flood insurance. And if you get that bill, you're going to know how bad that is. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, the National Flood Insurance Program loses money every year, is underwritten by Congress. Now if you've noticed lately, they have made some adjustments in the rates and they've gone up, but the actuarial cost on flood insurance is substantially higher than if you buy it through the program. So all I'm saying is that if you got a letter, go go start the mitigation process. And if you think you have an appeal, then start the appeal process. But we as a parish are going to do everything we can to ease the burden, on those 1,200 people going forward. Because look, we're somewhat to blame in the situation they're in. How many people benefited by the shortcuts? I can't tell you. I know it was easier for me to rebuild my house based on the way the parish did things. I went and got a permit. I got an inspector to come check the moisture in the studs at some point in time, and then I would just close my house up. The thought process of every time something needed to be done, have an inspector come out, or would have been overly burdensome. And I think, there are some people that are suffering because of it. There were tons of people that benefited, by the action. So I'm not going to criticize anybody over what, how we move forward. But I think the administration is going to do everything they can. I know if you call that number, there's probably for every one call they answer, there are probably 6 messages. They are diligent in getting back to you because I called them at 8:00 this morning and left a message, and I just got a return phone call, which I didn't answer because we're on this little podcast. But so I'm telling you, just be patient, leave a message. They're going to get back to you. They're overwhelmed right now with the phone calls. They've moved people from other areas into LoSEP to help them answer the phone. So look, Brandy and them are doing a great job over there trying to keep all this thing, moving forward. So, just be patient. They're going to get back to you. Don't get frustrated, and leave a message, and it'll all be good. They'll help. They'll talk you through the process. They'll explain better than what I just did on this, podcast about, what you can and cannot expect. And, I hate to say it, but it is what it is. We're going to assist you every way we can to try to ease the burden, at the parish level.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note as we wrap up here that there was a lot of pressure from a lot of different places. From FEMA Region 6, which is sort of the governing body for FEMA for our area. It's out of Tyler, Texas. From our Washington delegation, who said, look, I mean, we've gone to bat for y'all about as much as we can. There are certain things you're going to have to do to play ball, as well as from, the state and other places. So, there's been a lot of back and forth. It hadn't been a total bend over job, I guess you can say, but it has been one of those things where it's a process. So,
yeah, Yeah, we don't have any choice. I mean, it's not, it's not like you're caving into somebody. You've just got to do what you got to do. Make no mistake, we weren't the only parish that took shortcuts in 2016. And I'm gonna tell you, thank goodness, because if we'd have been the only one, we probably got kicked out of the flood insurance program. But because there were some big neighbors beside us that took shortcuts, you know what I'm talking about? They couldn't justify doing one without doing everybody, and the politics didn't allow those big parishes to get beat up. So, that was kind of a saving grace for us. But we they shot across the bow of our ship and said we need to get your house in order, and the administration's done a miraculous job getting it taken care of.
So, and it is important to note that process has been in the works for several years. This is just another sort of milestone in working through that. So, again, Mr. Talbert, thanks for joining us and coming to sort of explain. We talked a little bit about the history, what's going on now, and what you as a property or homeowner can do to work through this process. And of course, Ms. Brandy Janes at the Livingston Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, they are there. They are well versed on the documents, and they will help you work through it. Gonna let you do your outroduction as we exit here.
It's always a pleasure to come sit down and visit with you. Try to inform citizens as to what's going on. It's amazing to me. Every time I do one of these podcasts, I get 30 or 40 new Facebook friend requests. So, it is what it is. I'm Garry Talbert, Councilman District 2, representing Watson, the northwest corner of the parish.
The northwest corner. We're going to... I think we had one day, you and I were both kind of tired, and we kept calling it the northeast corner.
Northeast corner of the parish. So somebody like, that guy doesn't represent Albany and Holden. But
And again, my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us out there. If you're listening or watching, we appreciate it. We know this is a difficult time, but we are working through it the best that we can. Remember that the news is on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. There is a podcast page there as well for you to check these out, or they are on all your favorite podcast platforms, and of course, we post them on Facebook. We hope you have a great day. If you are one of the 1,200, please remember, make that phone call, make that email, get proactive with this. There are ways to work through it. It's going to be tough, but you have the place to start. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll check you out next time.